lots. Again, the overall preliminary plat that was submitted, and the final plat, which is just for the townhome lots that are contemplated to be developed as part of Phase 2. What you see off to the west is, again, that same spine road that will come in down off of Farmville. Again, just a master development plan image. And then Phase 2 reflected in the area with the Ashton Lakes property across a power easement to the south. Finally, Phase 3. This is 42 lots, single-family detached lots, located immediately west of the Phases 2 and 1 that we just presented to you. This is the overall preliminary for the single-family detached lots within the Farmville Lakes Plan Development District. And the section that you're going to be looking at as part of final plat is up in this vicinity. We'll just zoom in and take a look at that real quickly for the Commission's information, and we recommend approval. And one more look at the master development plan. Moving on to another subdivision, this is Enclave at Annaloo final plat. This property is triangular in shape. It's located on the south side of Annaloo Drive, very near the intersection of Annaloo and East University Drive, which you see off to the east. If you drive this stretch of road very often, you'll recognize this property immediately. It's very wooded with a fairly large residence that kind of sits up on a hill in the back. What's proposed here is more single-family residential development on either side of the existing dwelling, and you can see that reflected here in the preliminary plat that was submitted to you earlier. Back in September, it was submitted to our office, and the final. Almost identical. We talked about the couple access issues at Packet. I think those were adequately addressed. We recommend approval of this plat. There's an aerial image. You can see the residence that sits back well off of Annaloo. The Arbor's final plat. This is up near the terminus of White Street, with Cary Wood subdivision being immediately to the north and to the east. This is a 30-lot residential subdivision. This property, as the Commission's well aware, particularly those of you who've been on the Commission for some time, this is about the third development proposal for this particular property over about the past 13 years. It is an NC zone property. As a result, these are single-family detached residences that will be proposed for these lots. This is the larger preliminary plat that was submitted to you a little while ago. This is the final plat, and you can see, again, you've got the 30 lots here that are shown as part of this particular final plat. There will be some additional property platted south of here at some future point. And you can see the overall boundary of the entire subdivision area for the Arbors. Auburn Links Crossing Phase 2 final plat. Now we're moving on the south side of the city, south of Shell Toomer Parkway, east of South College. Auburn Links, of course, by virtue of its name, had been a golf course. It's now being developed in phases for single-family residential purposes. You've seen a prior phase. You see the Mims Trail Plan Development District on the other side of Mill Creek Road on the east, with the cross-hatching reflecting the Plan Development District designation. This is 23 lots, conventional single-family. This is the preliminary plat that was submitted. Phase 2, you can see the lots are darkened for Phase 2, and of course Phase 1's immediately to the north, or actually immediately to the east. And this will, Phase 1 creates a clean four-way intersection with Westover Street, which takes you into Mims Trail from Mill Creek Road. This is just an aerial view of the property. And with that, we recommend approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cotton. Okay, before we take a vote on this, there's a little procedural diversion that we're going to have here. Because I have, there could possibly be some perception of conflict of interest with me because of my personal home where I live. I'm going to recuse myself from the Arbors vote, so we have to pull that out of the consent agenda and vote on it separately. So for the first vote, I would like to ask for either questions, comments, or a motion to approve the consent agenda without item number 8.
I move we approve the consent agenda except for item number 8.
I'll second that, except for item 8.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you. Now, for agenda item 8, we need to vote on that. The Arbors final plat.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. So now we'll go ahead and move to our new business. The first item of business, agenda item number 10, PL 2018-00761, is a zoning ordinance amendment that relates to the terminations of PDDs. Mr. Cotton.
Yes, sir. This is the first of two city-initiated zoning ordinance text amendments that have been vetted with the commission during prior work session activity, the first of which affects Article 5, which is our detailed use regulations, and more specifically, our plan development district and the corresponding master development plan requirement for plan development districts. Under the current regulations, if a property, and typically it's in a scenario where there's a development plan that's known, PDDs are usually larger pieces of property. They're at least a minimum of 10 acres in size. They're often mixed use in nature. Someone will come in with a development plan. Historically, it's been on not necessarily the fringe of town, but outlying areas of town where there's that much land available to develop, and therefore it's zoned rural. So in order to be eligible for a PDD, that property first has to be rezoned out of rural to another designation that's eligible for a planned development district overlay. It's obviously going to be a zoning district that permits greater density and intensity. Then a planned development district is applied for. And of course, there's an assumption and presumption, and 90% of the time, if not more, this comes to pass. The property moves about and it's developed in accordance with its master development plan and no issue presents itself. However, on very rare occasion, if a planned development district is not commenced, development activity is not commenced within 24 months, that PDD designation goes away. But whatever that base zone that it was rezoned to out of rural remains, which is for obvious reasons not in the best interest of the city. Zoning decisions are made in a PDD context based on the plan being realized. If that plan is not realized, then that opens up that base zone to be rezoned for something entirely different, many of which could be permitted by right and never require additional review by the Planning Commission or the City Council. We had a recent example of a case like that out on Wire Road, just east of the soccer complex, where there was an assisted living facility proposed. It was approved. It was rezoned to limited development district from rural. It was then placed with a PDD designation, and as what I've just described to you, the assisted living facility never came to be. The PDD went away, and now there's about 30 acres of limited development district sitting out on Wire Road, which someone coming in from the outside would observe it to be an obvious spot zone property. So what we would like to be able to avoid moving forward is that scenario presenting itself again. So what this amendment would dictate and require is that if that similar scenario, and let's just use that as the example because that's probably best for illustrative purposes. If that same assisted living facility comes in, if this is adopted and it came in, when that plan and they didn't build it, when that plan development district expired, the base zone that the rural property was rezoned to be eligible for the PDD in that example limited development district would also revert, in this case, back to rural. So you've got all that information in your packet, but I wanted to be fairly descriptive about it for the public's information, but that's what the staff's asking you to consider tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, this zoning ordinance amendment requires a public hearing, so would anybody like to come forward now? I'll open the public hearing for this agenda item. Please step forward if you're interested in speaking. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, ask for questions, comments, or a motion from the commission.
I'll move to approve case PL 2018-00761.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay, agenda item number 11, PL 2018-00762 is another zoning ordinance amendment, and this is for academic detached dwelling units. Mr. Cotton, please.
Yes, sir. This is the second of the two text amendments. This will be the one I think's received more attention. It's taken some time to develop, quite a bit of work. And obviously, the commission's well aware of it, and we've had a good bit of coverage in the media about really the genesis for this amendment and why the staff's brought forward to you. Essentially, what it would be a new use type in our performance residential classification for what we would call academic detached dwelling units. This is essentially a single unit on a single lot of record that up until the time this amendment is approved, if it is approved and adopted, currently has to be identified and classified as a single-family residence, when in fact these typically are of the 5-bedroom, 5-bath variety. They're configured very much like individual dorms in a single-unit context. The simplest way and probably the best analogy I can provide for illustrative purposes is this commission is well aware of the very lengthy, nearly 3-year downtown master planning process that we went through back in 2013 and ultimately adopted in very early 2016. During the very latter part of that review process was when we were really beginning to see these larger private dorms express interest in locating in the city, many of which are either completed or are under construction downtown. And so what we had to do fairly quickly was, number one, acknowledge, and number two, come up with a framework by which we could regulate those private dorms separate and apart from any other type of multifamily offering, which we were able to do. And that's what we call private dormitories, and we've been using that regulation for nearly 3 years now. What we're asking the Planning Commission to consider, and ultimately the City Council is doing something similar, but for instead of talking in a multifamily context, we're talking in a single-family context, and essentially come up with a student housing construct and framework to regulate what we're calling academic detached dwelling units, to be able to regulate those, locate those more appropriately than we can at present, because at present, we're forced essentially by virtue of the limitations in our current ordinance to classify them as single-family residences. And I think what you've seen come out and what we've certainly acknowledged is that's not the best way to regulate these things, nor does it necessarily allow us to locate them in the most appropriate locations. This is not something that I really felt important to share publicly, and it's in the staff report, is that college towns are not unique. We've spoken with a lot of our planning peers and a lot of other college communities. Typically, just like private dorms are all over the country and college communities, this type of unit is as well. And I provided some examples in the staff report, one from College Station in particular, where that situation there is even is a significantly larger conundrum than what we face here, not only because of the size of the community and the size of the campus relative to ours, but the fact that that campus is actually located right in between 2 jurisdictions. And so you've actually got 2 jurisdictions that are dealing with the same issue. But we think it's important to address. I've conceded in the past that I wish we'd been able to do it quicker than we have, but there are a number of reasons why that took place. Most of which, of course, is allowing everyone to have an opportunity to vet it and be made aware of it. But nevertheless, we are here tonight, and we are asking that you adopt the zoning ordinance text amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. This zoning ordinance also requires a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody that's interested in speaking to please come forward.
O.B. Jackson again. This kind of housing there's been a plethora of housing like this on Canton Avenue and throughout the Northwest Auburn community. It kind of skates around what it's really saying can and can't happen. We have a situation that's coming up probably at you guys' next meeting with the Cadino property. That property is already zoned RDD. And we understand just through the grapevine, that's the way I'm going to put it, that the property possibly will come up as single-family fee simple lots. Now, what I have for Forrest is how will we know that this gentleman, which I understand the density is greater, how will we know and be able to identify whether there's 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, or whatever in this particular building that's supposed to be a single-family building for single-family, basically lots, unrelated people, how will we be able to know and be assured that there will not be this same type of housing going on in an RDD? Even though this particular property was set aside in the 2020 land use plan to be NC, but right now it's RDD. And we don't know how you guys are going to rule on it. I don't know how much jurisdiction you'll have
Talking
on it.
about the ordinance, or are we talking about another?
We're talking about the ordinance, how this can play back into an RDD zone, which it could. If these properties are subdivided and given a fee simple lot line, this type of housing could very well end up just flowing right back over into an RDD zone. Am I right, Forrest?
Well, under the current proposal, let's say this ordinance is codified, and the Corradino property comes up with something else to put on the property, which they certainly will, and the property zoned RDD. What will happen is we're doing this already at the staff level. This ordinance will formally require it. That we're in a situation now where the planning department, not just the inspection services department, really needs to review all floor plans. And it's in reviewing those floor plans that we can make a determination as to, we have to make a call. What type of use will this be? Based on how the floor, and we have a number of different factors that we employ and criteria that we use. And again, a lot of this is carrying over simply the framework that we created for private dorms in the multifamily context, and now applying it in a single-family context. So it makes our work, because we've already been down that road, so it's not like we're starting anew. We've actually got a little bit of track record in doing this kind of thing. If someone represents it that it's single-family, we'll ask to look at their floor plans. But, of course, what we do know is that in an RDD context, single-family detached is permitted by right.
Right, exactly. So the answer to my question is this could very well happen again in that RDD zone.
What could happen?
They could come in with a 4 or 5 bedroom house that's
Like a private dorm.
like a private
in this-
dorm.
No.
No.
No, that could
under
not
this-
happen. They could come in with a 4 or 5 bedroom house if it's deemed to be a single-family residential use.
What would stop
If the staff deems it to be a academic detached dwelling unit, it could not go in.
So unrelated people could not live
It would be
there?
conditional, and it is conditional in the context of that property and where it's located and what's around it. The staff would recommend denial of an academic detached dwelling unit at that location.
Right, and
Unfortunately, that RDD piece is, and we've dealt with this a lot during the Northwest Auburn Neighborhood Plan, that's that last, it happens to be large and undeveloped in RDD. Fortunately, there's not much else in the way of RDD out in Northwest Auburn.
I think what he's asking, however, is if it goes in as single-family and it's determined that 5 unrelated individuals live there, what can the city do?
Nothing.
That's the question.
nothing. So, you know, it's 6 in one hand and half a dozen in the other.
Well, they
You're
would
damned
be-
if you do, if we do a single-family fee simple lots, and we're damned if we don't allow that, because the density goes up. But what I don't like about that Cadino property is it was planned in the 2020 plan for it to be NC.
Well, that's
And it never
another-
changed, but I know that's not neither here nor there.
The point is, I think, if there are 5 unrelated individuals living in a single-family house that's not zoned that, then they're in violation of our ordinance.
Right.
But there's nothing can be done about
But
it.
in RDD, that's not the case, right?
No, therein lies the problem with this property. RDD allows up to 5 unrelated individuals
that's
to reside in a
And the
unit.
density goes back up, and we're being gentrification's taking place. We got a plethora of people now that's moving in on that property, which depletes the voting strength and several other things in that particular neighborhood.
Okay, so
So my complaint is, I think it needs to be a little bit more defined, or that property, should be dealt with. Since that's the last piece in Northwest Auburn, it wasn't done in the Northwest Auburn plan. I think it needs to be dealt with
we'll have to
through you guys.
We'll have to deal with that when it comes to us. Thank you.
We can say that this is an attempt to require, if this goes through the city council, it has to be approved of the city council and us tonight and then city council. But the purpose of this amendment is to require the people who build 5-bedroom, 5-bath homes in the RDD, first it's conditional, it'll have to come before this board, they must submit the floor plans, and there are certain things we know that are common to properties that are marketed to unrelated individuals like students.
Right.
And so that would allow us then to know whether it's going to be marketed to that and deal with that. This,
And with that being,
this we won't.
with that being said, I think you guys need to send a message to the council that that particular issue needs to be dealt with as it pertains to unrelated people, and this being the last of the larger tracks. I appreciate you guys.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this ordinance amendment?
My name is Pamela Pitts. I reside at 412 Richland Road, Auburn. As has already been stated, we've been going through this a long time. It's been quite a few years trying to get to this point. I have one question for us. In the same scenario, they just say they want to build single-family detached. With this ordinance, do you require them to specify which just single-family detached, or do you ask them, do they have to specify if it's academic?
Well, they have to declare what it is. When this ordinance is codified, we'll get to review the floor plan and determine if what they represented to us, if we agree with it or disagree with it.
Okay, so whether it's single-family period, you'll be able to look at the floor plan.
We're going to look at all residential floor plans now. We have to. I'm not.
All to pass the ordinance.
Thank you. I love it.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak on this issue?
My name is Chris Birdsong, and
Give us
really
your address, please.
at 814 Antelope.
Thank you.
And I kind of want the same thing Mr. Jackson wants. I want it defined a little better. I don't like it being as vague. And the question that I have is, if it is deemed academic detached, is that immediately voted down? Will there be any 5-bedroom houses that will meet the code?
Well,
Where they are.
yeah, it depends on where they're located.
So it is possible to build a 5-bedroom, 5-bath house if it meets whose standards?
Again, it depends on where it's built. That's
Okay,
how we use things.
If it's in an RDD
Right.
neighborhood that allows 5 unrelated,
Right.
will a 5-bedroom house be able to be built?
It's conditional.
It'll depend on the location. That's why it's conditional use. There may be places where it's compatible given the uses in the surrounding neighborhood, and there may be other places where it's not.
I understand.
And we'll recommend accordingly.
And I understand that, and I've been in a few of the packet meetings, and the last one was brought up that, and I really, when all this started, I thought that a lot of the problem was parking off the street or parking on the street, and some property that I own, it allows for 5 unrelated, and only 2 people have to park off the street in this, and we've addressed those problems, and we've got it where they're all parking off the street. And then it was brought up to add a 6th parking spot in these houses. And I understand that we want to get we want it controlled, but I don't see how adding a 6th parking spot will correct anything. If you have visitors, you're going to have more than one visitor. And I understand we want the cars off the street. We want them behind the building, and that's what we want. We want the same thing you guys want. But adding a 6th parking spot, then we're going to have something with, the impervious surface, or we're going to have a bunch of gravel driveways on a lot of these streets. And I'd prefer to have a paved driveway and meet these ordinances. And I don't see how we can do it with 6 parking places. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Also remind you, besides giving your name and address, please sign up at the
Felix
end.
Lagasse, 2611 Wilmington Court. My question is, RDD, NRD, ADU, I mean, it's all 5 unrelated, okay? So if we're going to have, basically, we're setting.
Put that next slide up, the matrix, just so I can see that one, kind of, okay.
Basically, what we're saying is, we're going to submit something to the city, and the city's going to say yay or nay, whether it's good or bad. But my thing is.
It's a conditional use, right?
Yeah, but is there some specs on this? I mean, are you going to have some specs to where you need to have a bigger master bedroom? You got to have a bigger common area? You got to have some kind of specs.
First of all, we're not going to say if it's good or bad. We're going to say if it's an academic detached dwelling unit or not.
Okay, well, let's say if it's NRD, 5 unrelated. Okay, it's not ADU, but it's 5 unrelated. Okay, what considers, I can't put 5 college kids in there, I'm asking.
Well, you can't do it at all.
What do you mean you can't do it at all? 5 unrelated?
Because it's NRD.
How about RDD?
It will be conditional use.
Okay, is there specs on that? On what?
There are
Single family?
well, number one, there are criteria in the zoning ordinance for what we must look at as part of a conditional use review. And yes, there are criteria that we employ in order to make a staff determination on whether or not a given unit is a single family detached unit or an academic detached dwelling unit. So the answer to the question is yes.
What I'm trying to figure out, though, when you have 5 unrelated, how do you determine if it's going to be, because I heard someone say something about basically you had to have a bigger common area, you had to have a bigger master bedroom, maybe a half bath downstairs, and say, okay, this works in this location. Is that, how do you determine?
There design criteria?
Is there a
There's not really
spec?
design
I'm just trying to
criteria
say.
that we're dealing with, right?
Can I?
I want to be a little clear on what you can and can't do.
Well, I mean,
The criteria is, I think you know what a single-family
Yes, I do.
home looks like. Mm-hmm. I think you also know what a student dwelling looks like. The difference has to do not specifically square footage, but there's usually a master bedroom in most single-family homes I've been in.
Correct.
Most of the time, the kitchen area is is larger and made for family cooking,
Correct.
that sort of thing. They usually have a living room or a large den and things like that. You go into student dwelling, they're small. That part of the building is smaller.
Right, I'm just asking for, is there
I know
certain
what you
specs
want.
on
You'd like
that?
to say 20% of it has to be this and 15% of it has to be that. We've tried specifics in development standards, and the developers say that pins them down and hems them in. So we've got this somewhat subjective, but yes, a quantifiable process to try to determine that from our professional staff.
And they can give you examples if you want to see them. I mean,
Yeah, I would just like to know, I understand the master bedroom,
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
So if it doesn't
bigger.
have
I
one-
understand maybe
you wouldn't have to
half
have that in a
common, but you can always have 4 bedrooms upstairs and 4 baths. I'm fine with that. So downstairs, the common area, is it going to be a certain size, or we're basically submitting plans, or someone's going to submit plans?
You'll want us to do that.
Would you want us to do that?
Hey, I'd rather know what I've got. If I had certain specs, I'm all for it. Then I know exactly what I can and can't do. Versus me turning in something and saying, no, that's not going to work. Okay, what do you want done? Because I don't know. It's a gray area. I don't like a gray area. I'd rather know what I can and can't do. Then it's like, okay, I know what, I can go to, here, my architect, draw this up. All right, we submit it, we're good. Instead of sitting there, well, no, you got to have, this got to be a little bit bigger. Or no, we don't like this, or we don't like that. If I had my specs, then I know what I can do and can't do.
But
I
if
don't
you think
the
about
intent is
the
to
floor
nickel and dime.
plans that they will be reviewing, it's not all necessarily about the floor plans. If that purpose-built student 5-person house is built without the necessary parking spots for the 5 people living there, that's what brought this to
Yeah, I don't
our
have a
desk.
problem with the parking spots. I understand, if you have 5, if it's a 5-bedroom house, I don't have a problem giving 5 spots, but even though you don't get that on sometimes a single-family house that has 5 bedrooms, but I'm fine with that. But I just would like the gray area, I would just like it to be a little clearer on what you can and can't do versus we have one person that sits there and you submit it to them, or I don't know, maybe it goes before a board. I don't know who it goes before, but they look at it and say, no, that's not good. Okay, what is it you want now? You want this, you want that? Okay, I'm fine with that. Go back to the drawing board. It's just a process that I think we could eliminate if we were clear about what you can and can't do. But,
Okay.
all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's like getting government into your knickers.
My name is Bruno Ulrich, 1518 Stewart Circle. As I understand it, right now it's permitted in maybe 3 districts and conditional in 4 or 5 other districts.
Okay.
It would seem that a very simple solution to take away the abstract nature of this ordinance, proposed ordinance, is to establish a separate, distinct zoning classification for it, as opposed to having the conditional uses. Because I know from my own practices, conditional uses are subject to personal opinions and others factors. So I would recommend that a separate, distinct ordinance be established as a zoning classification for academic housing.
Okay, thank you.
Nick Hayes, 333 Brookside. I think it's important to point out that Mr. Jackson, Mr. Birdsong, Mr. Ulrich, and another gentleman, all basically in different ways said the same thing. And respectfully to Mr. Cotton, who I know the planning staff has worked very hard on this and is trying to do what's been asked of them. I disagree that it does have defined standards. I don't think anyone really knows what the rules of the road are. And it is, as that ordinance draft says repeatedly, at the planning director's discretion. And that is totally, as Mr. Ulrich said, totally subject to the opinion of Forrest. And while we all respect the work Forrest does, what if he's no longer planning director? What about who makes up the planning commission going forward? And the uncertainty is the greatest threat to the economy. Knowing the rules of the road, I may not like the rules, but if I know the rules, I can deal with it. When I don't know the rules, it causes hesitation, which then may be if you know the rules, hey, the property's worth this. If I don't know the rules, well, that uncertainty, I'm going to discount it. And so we are, I think, as I mentioned to some of the planning commission members, as well as council, this is all very confusing. The Canton Avenue area was just recently changed from RDD to NRD not very long ago. Some of you on the planning commission may not have even been a part of that. And now here we are again, changing it again. And we're using way too blunt of an instrument going citywide across multiple zonings for what is really a problem in a very small area. And with regards to the Cordino property, the project that has been proposed, the Cordino project, academic dwelling unit has nothing to do with it. It does pertain to the zoning within which the Cordino property is, but that project has nothing to do with academic dwelling units. It's a multifamily project which you and the city and the council already have conditional powers over. The boulevard, the avenue, 160 Ross, countless of these large cottage developments where it's a bunch of student houses, those are multifamily properties. I doubt there are, I don't know this, but I bet there aren't 40 academic dwelling units across the city. If they're all 5 bedrooms, that's 200 beds. That's a third of one of these apartments downtown. So if we're worried about bed counts, what are we really doing here? And for the folks who live in the Canton area, this is going to make your property worth less money. If you don't want it, that's fine. I just think it's important for everyone to know the reality and the consequences. If that's what you want, then great. but I think it's important to know that your property will go down in value. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Ken Pylant. I reside at 1400 Hanneloo Drive in Auburn, Alabama. I've also been a part directly and indirectly with a lot of individuals that's come up here before me, including Mr. Jackson, in regards to student housing as a whole, and even including the Northwest Auburn, the Canton Avenue area specifically. I think that we all agree, and it seems to get redundant, but I still feel that anybody and everybody needs to get up here and talk about it. I think if we had a show of hands, there's a couple things that we can kind of clear the air real quick about. If we took a poll, who all is here due to the university? I am. I know I am. Who believes that our economy revolves around the university? We don't have to raise our hands, we can raise them silently, but the reality is that without this university, we don't have a university without students. We don't have happy students, we have lower enrollment. We want them, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to the people that live here, and I'm going to use some specific examples in regards to me. I hear you, Phil. So what I would like to point out is that we need to do all these things together and collectively. And I agree with Nick, pointing out that Forrest and the team, and I work diligently with these guys on a weekly basis, and not even in regards to this specific project. So I have a great relationship with these people. But we have to come to a common ground. And like Felix said, we cannot have gray. Nobody can operate gray. I look up here, I see, around the room, up there at the bench, out here in the crowd, there's a lot of business owners, small business owners. I'm one of them. I'm from here. I operate, started up my own small business. There is no business, small, large, medium in size, that can operate in the gray. You go out of business, you make poor choices, bad decisions, it puts you in the red. Okay, so we have to have this. It cannot be subjective, and it cannot be made by one person. You get cross with that one person, and Forrest, no disrespect. I don't mean it like that at all, but that's the reality. You cannot have one individual making a decision in which that can jeopardize multi-million-dollar projects. Secondly, one thing that I'd also like to point out is that if this does pass, and the areas in which that they are permitted by right are all basically in the urban core. Who in this room has the money to buy a piece of property in the urban core? I tell you what, Mr. Marshall, I'll buy your McDonald's right now. $100,000. Nanette, will you draw up the contract? He won't sell it to me for $100,000. I can't put a 5-bedroom, 5-bath ADDU in downtown Auburn. It's not going to happen. What will happen for us is the people that already own that property. Property cannot change hands in the urban core, and an ADU cannot be permitted. So what this does is it eradicates ADDU. It eradicates the people that are working extraordinarily hard to try to get a crumb off of the pie. Not a slice, not even a crust, a crumb. So we've allowed these huge multi-million-dollar REITs to come in, and I know that we're working diligently to also, slow that down. But they're here. And isn't that what's it about? Students have always been here. Students have always lived in basements, garage apartments. Mr. McCord, I heard you talk about in a packet meeting the other day about living, was it Mercer or Hopper Circle? The business in which that I'm involved in, we renovate and remodel, and unfortunately sometimes tear down homes. I guarantee you most everybody that I do contract work for, every single time that they want me to do is add a bathroom. Who doesn't want an extra bathroom? My wife would love for me to have my own bathroom, as a matter of fact. If we all want to be honest in this room, everybody would like to have their own bathroom and not clean up after somebody else. So let's make this objective. Let's have common sense. Let's take care of all the residents of Auburn. Student body and those affiliated with the university represent, I think, over half. Anyway, just let's think about this. Maybe it's not the time to go ahead and invoke it. And maybe we need to do a little bit more due diligence. Maybe we need to listen across the board to everybody that has something at stake. And by the way, there are other people that are for the development, the current development in the Canton area. I know they have come to us and would like to sell their property. The problem that this has caused is like what Nick was saying, this gray area causes everybody to stop. And it goes from where you pay this up here to where you're not even interested. And so now you've got this kind of area that's kind of both.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Thanks. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you. Anybody else? Come on.
Excuse me, William Dean, 474 Scott Street. With over 50 years' experience as a real estate appraiser, analyzing properties all over Auburn specifically and all over Alabama and good parts of Georgia, I want to take just a minor correction on a couple of things. One, Mr. Hayes' statement that these developments are devaluing their people's property. I would just basically say that if you take $125,000 to $150,000 residential property in one of these neighborhoods and convert it over to whatever you want to call it, student housing, academic dwellings or what have you, and you have $200,000 lots, I find that hard to believe that they're devaluing their property. Unfortunately, what you're doing is pricing the property owners out of their neighborhood. But, you know, they not only does the value of their property goes up, as we own other properties too, your property taxes go up along with them, so that it becomes the developer is not interested in renting the house because he can't get a return on it at its present rate, so he tears it down and redevelops it. When they're tenants and when they're private property owners, they are bound to pay the property tax, and then they get to the point to where, one, they don't want to live in the neighborhood anymore, and two, the values have gotten so high, sure, they can sell and, you know, make a little profit, but then on the other hand, they can't sell their house and lot for enough to go buy a new house in another neighborhood. So that would be the valuation point. The other thing that I have, I'm just still a little confused. I do a lot of analysis of all type properties, especially student housing, and you've got your academic dwelling unit, which is going to be 5-bedroom, 5-bath criteria of something which has limited definition, but how about the 6-bedroom, 5-baths and the 7-bedroom, 4-baths? And are they going to be classed as academic dwelling units, or are they going to be classed as private dormitories? So you've got sort of a blend between these two.
For 6 or 7, they're probably going to be classified as an unrelated occupancy violation.
No. If they're built, say, build it in urban neighborhood south, urban neighborhood east, and you build a 7-bedroom, 6-bath, 5-bath house.
You're limited to 5 people. The ordinance, if passed,
in neighborhood, urban neighborhood south, I don't think so.
Well, no, if it's an academic dwelling unit, it'd be limited to 5 people.
But it wouldn't be an academic dwelling unit if it's got 6 or 7 bedrooms. What would it be?
A boarding house, which also has its own set of criteria.
That would be a private dormitory? You know, I just don't, I'm just not, can't get my grasp around the definitions of the two units and what the properties will be.
Yeah, the occupancy in the urban neighborhoods is up to 5 unrelateds. Okay, so you can't have 6 unrelateds.
Per dwelling unit.
Yeah, that's right.
But you can have an apartment complex with 200 in it.
But that's not an academic detached dwelling unit.
Different use.
But it's in the same zone, it's the same similar type structure.
Different use.
Oh.
I mean, it's the definition of the two units is I'm having a problem gaining which is which.
One means more than one means one.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry. We'll discuss it later, Forrest. Thank y'all.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? No, you've already had a speak here, right? Sorry.
Only at one time.
My name's Corey Webb, 631 Shawnee Street. Pardon me, my voice is sore. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but I do have a place that's RDD. And I've talked to some people that are adults in the service industry here and worked a deal out that I was going to provide a affordable place for 5 adults to have a home, and they were going to rent it from me. Obviously, they want their own bathrooms. Would that, because of that, would that make it fall into the academic detached dwelling unit and it not be allowed?
Say so.
If I see your floor plan, I can tell you in a very limited amount of time how we would classify.
Well, they're 5 adults, and so they obviously, like I said, each want their own bathroom, and I'm trying to build it affordable for them.
Without further information, it sounds like it would be one of these, right?
Good.
And that would, so.
But I can't tell you until I see the floor plan.
Well, I think the floor plan would probably meet something similar to the academic detached dwelling unit, from what I'm hearing y'all say. And now, not that I've made a promise to them, but 5 unrelated. Who are the 5 unrelated people, I guess, that you would put somewhere?
Doesn't really matter.
I don't understand that question.
I'm asking if 5 unrelated adults,
right?
5 bedrooms, 5 baths, somewhat of a smaller common area, so I could build it affordable for them.
Mm-hmm. It may or may not be determined to be an academic detached dwelling unit.
So therefore, well, they'd have to look elsewhere then.
No, not necessarily. It would require conditional use approval. Then it would depend upon the location and what's around it, and if it's compatible or not.
You'd have to go through the process to come through the planning commission and have the use approved, and it's just a matter of the details of what you present. We would be able to figure it out from there.
Okay, all right, that answers my question. So we don't know what 5 unrelated people could. I guess I'm asking, like 5 unrelated people.
We're not saying 5 unrelated students. We're saying 5 unrelated
individuals.
Individuals, doesn't matter who they are. They could be retired.
They could be retired. So
sure.
And then what do you call that? Just a 5 unrelated home?
He called it an academic dwelling unit, but it was still, the criteria is the same.
All right. Thank you very much.
I know I have spoken once.
Excuse me, sir. No, you've already had your chance at the apple. I'm sorry. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Don't have any notes. Didn't really plan on talking tonight, but I do have a familiarity with the academic detached dwelling unit, the infamous ADDU.
We can call it all sorts of different things.
That's right.
Name.
Again.
Oh, can you give me your name and address?
It's Ryan Cassadaban. I'm 801 South Gay Street.
And then sign in when you're done.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this has been an ongoing issue. I know Forrest and the staff have worked on, trying to come up with some good guidelines to kind of quantify and qualify what this creature is. Early on, some folks that have done these in the past were brought in. We talked. I know he talked with different people in the community about kind of the best way to address it, and it's been brought up that this new phenomena of these houses close to campus where students are living in. Amazing. It's what a surprise it is. And my argument was that, in fact, this new phenomena is the oldest form of student housing in Auburn, Alabama. This is where people lived. They came to school. There were houses close to campus. I personally lived in a house with some fraternity brothers on Janelda that the fellow named Miguel owned. There were 8 of us lived in there, 8 fraternity brothers. It was pretty nasty, but we lived there and we enjoyed it. We had a great time.
I'll bet you only had 2 bathrooms.
That's right. Yeah. We weren't lucky enough to have a bunch of bathrooms. Rent was only, about $150 a person too. But, I do think that it's good that they've kind of finally put a name to it and addressed what it is when someone goes in to permit it, that it's not a single family house. And I think that it was good that they addressed the fact that, when you would go in, and this is still kind of my rub, and we've talked about this before, and I still see it as a problem, in the urban neighborhoods, which is in fact, all the talk about, North Auburn, which is kind of what brought this to a head, this product type is not even allowed in that area. So that's kind of what brought the naming of this thing in the code to a head, but it's not even allowed over there. So it's going to be built permitted by right in the urban neighborhoods. And as the name would imply, urban means things close together and, tight quarters and everything. And I feel that the way our code is, I've built in a lot of different areas. I was in Atlanta for many years. With this performance code, if you get into a zoning area, urban neighborhood, southeast, west, and it has certain maximum allowances for ISR, FAR, bedrooms, and such, sounds good on paper. My background is I have a master's degree in civil engineering. Undergrad was here at Auburn. I got a master's out in Utah. And I always deal with a fellow named Parker Lewis, who many of you know, he's been here for years and years. We like to think we're fairly smart. We get together and we're like, hey, this is what I want to do. And then we talk about it a minute and we're like, hey, I think we can do it. And then we make an appointment with these guys, of course, to clarify, but really just to see, can we do it? Because we don't know. And I think the code is that confusing with all the different charts, and go to here and look at your intensity classification and what are you next to and where's the buffers and all, that it's very difficult to just know what you're supposed to be doing.
Are you saying that in general, or is it this?
I'm saying in general. I mean, this is part of it. My wish is that the city would, I think they need to get this passed. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I think there are issues in other areas that this needs to address. I wish they would drop back and look at it more fully with other codes, because what happens as a developer is this ADDU is one house on one lot, which I might add, I think is the best way for that property to change over time. It's the most easily saleable, most easily financed to have it be on a fee simple lot. When you put 2 of these identical units on one lot, it becomes a private dormitory. And then with that, there are different ISRs, different FARs, I believe. And if I'm misspeaking, Forrest, please jump in on that. I think the FAR, ISR change when it's 2 of them on one lot. And I just wish that there would be, and I'm almost done, I just wish there would be some more cohesiveness in the code, like I can do this over here, and when I go to this other type of zoning, I can do this other, not zoning, but housing type, I can do this other thing, and I wish that would be addressed more totally in their analysis of our code, because I think it pinballs you into these different categories, and one may be better for the future kind of use of these things than forcing people to build townhomes or apartments instead of building these fee simple type looking homes that are used for student housing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, please sign up. Sign in. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look for questions, comments, discussion, motion, whatever from this plan.
If the audience or the people that spoke sound confused, I'm really confused. Because I didn't hear a consensus. I mean, I can't believe that some developer wants us to say
Yeah, I have a hard time with
You've got a
that, too.
minimum 10 by 10 bedroom or 12 by 12. The bathroom's got to be 6 by 8. You've got to have a living area that's this. I can't imagine that's
like
what would be preferred.
putting government back into your living room with you.
We have one specific thing in there, and it's already been disagreed with, which was the parking, 1.1 parking spaces. Already said that won't work.
No, sir, we've closed the public hearing. I'm sorry.
Because that was brought up to try to define what is what is a single-family house versus a other.
Personally, I think that this came up and we're getting lost in a lot of the floor plan issue, but mainly for me, it's parking. I want everybody who lives in the dwelling to have a place to park that is off the street. And I think we're getting lost in the floor plans, and I think it was initially brought up that parking was terrible in certain areas of the city where these have been built.
Yeah,
And I also agree, and I also think that, I agree with Nanette, but then also it's compatibility of these homes going up in, mostly
in the areas that they're
areas.
going, yeah.
Yeah, I think the ordinance provides more flexibility than we have right now, if I'm not mistaken. And it seems to me it quantifies where they can be built by right, and if not, then they can come before the commission.
But I think that go ahead.
Forest is advisory to this board. And this board does not hesitate to disagree with our staff when they propose something that does not quite fit
Absolutely.
with our majority.
And we do that during the conditional hearings, conditional approval hearings.
Right, so,
yeah. No, he's not going to propose something way off the wall or come in here with one time it's going to be a single family and the next time it's academic housing.
I mean, for example, the project that we approved on the corner of Gay Street and
Drake.
I mean, is a really good example of conditional use. You know, it's a street of single-family houses, but we approved it because it is compatible to what's happening there. And it seems to me that this ordinance gives the developer a lot more flexibility than we have now. Plus, it seems to me more definition. Yes. I mean, other than specific criteria of size of bedrooms and so forth, which I don't think we want to do.
And you know, the nature of as we go forward, one of the comments that I thought was definitely relevant was, you know, we don't want to put all the power into one person. Well, I think there's some discretion there. We have a way of dealing with that during our conditional hearings, but the nature of this commission is going to change over time too. And so there's going to be differences over time, but I think the flexibility afforded by what we've got here now will allow for that to happen. And I think you're still going to get representation from the community that's going to be able to make the right decisions.
I pretty much agree with everything said, but I think it is a persuasive argument to say that having a ordinance that is in any way vague or arbitrary or subjective is actually not good for the economy, the local economy, and for people that want to build units in certain places. But I agree that I think it's kind of misleading to say that, whatever the staff recommendation is, that's how it's going to be, because it's a recommendation. It comes to the planning commission. If it's conditional, sometimes we disagree with the staff. But I do want to ask.
And then the city council gets their
city
bite at
council
it.
exactly
Right.
after that. So, but I did want to ask for as far as, because I understand that this product type was based loosely on a private dormitory, and some changes were made. So, kind of what. Can you explain some of the difference between those two product types and whether or not this is more vague or subjective than the private dormitories?
To the extent that they're vague and subjective, I'd say they're equally so.
Okay. So just for the public's sake, I know the private dormitory, a lot of the difference is you have your height, you have more bedrooms, I assume, and whatnot. So what are some of the major differences?
Like what bumps you from this to a private dormitory?
Yeah, what are the differences?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the private dormitory regulations were, the base foundation for that was our base multifamily development regulations, and then adjusted to recognize the fact that it's for student living. And the vagueness it's not as vague as it may seem. It's actually, when you start really drilling down to it, most of it's inherently obvious. Whether it's a private dorm, we very quickly could determine that private dorms are very unique from any other type of multifamily offering, and therefore we developed regulations. it's not that, to me, it's quite simple. It's just a matter of taking what we learned from the multifamily situation and creating the private dorm regs. Now we're taking the single-family detached. What we're doing right now is we're classifying these as single-family detached units. That is inherently incorrect.
Right.
And that's what this is really all about.
I think everything, even the people that are opposed to it would agree that you have to have different types of product types, and we understand what we're trying to do based on the zoning, but I guess the only issue would be the argument saying that, okay, the staff gets a floor plan, and, is this floor plan, and they're almost identical, okay, now this is a ADDU, but this one's not, this one is single family, things like that. So I understand the kind of the nervousness that could bring, but again, to the point of most of the commissioners here, I think that it might be a little overblown because, again, if you make a recommendation, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how we're going to vote, and that's how the city council is going to see it as well. Again, these people on this board changes, and we're trying to reflect what the community wishes, the wishes of Auburn will be in the future. So that's kind of how it works.
I think what I heard to some degree was a lot of developers feel like they hadn't had a lot of input into this. Do you agree with that, Forrest? I mean, I know they've all talked to you, and you tend to.
We deliberately, we reached out, and I think this meeting goes back to early October. We reached out to everyone that we knew that was already building these kinds of things, that we knew that once we had these regulations developed, they would be qualify as academic detached dwelling units, which is, rightly or wrongly, everybody kind of alludes to the Fraser-Canton situation, and I think that's kind of ground zero for this, quite frankly. So I think it's accurate to point to that scenario, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We just want to make sure we can do a better job of accurately classifying things and regulating them appropriately, and that was the intent of this proposal.
And to ensure compatibility with
and that's why we've recommended that these be conditional uses in certain districts where compatibility issues may exist, and so we need to evaluate those.
I feel like this has had a great deal of work by staff, and we certainly talked about it for 4 months at least. I move we approve.
I second that.
Have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry.
We'll have in further discussion. We have a motion and a second on the floor, though.
Yes, and I would like to ask, the 1.1 parking spaces is kind of one of my things that I don't love about this, really the only thing I don't love about this particular text amendment, but is there any way in the future, since this is so new, that it could change or be amended to?
Absolutely.
We can always come back.
I want to make sure that it will work in the private sector. I want to make sure that somebody can actually go out there and build this with
that's certainly not uncommon, where we learn lessons from the development community, and ISR is an issue that we've dealt with in the past and tried to make some adjustments where we had essentially some inequities in the way our ISR was calibrated relative to lot size. So when folks, particularly in the development community, bring those issues to our attention, we try to take a look at them and see if we can't make them work better. So if we put these in place and things aren't working, then we've got a responsibility to come back to you and say, look, this isn't working. We need to adjust this or tweak this or what have you. So
another amendment.
That's all part of it.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay, agenda item 12, PL 2018-00764, Sanford Village, recommendation for a planned development district. Mr. Howell.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Case before you, like you said, is an application to apply the planned development district overlay to approximately 30.5 acres, which is currently in the comprehensive development district. Located at the intersection of East Glen and East Sanford, this property is a fairly large land that's on the south side of that. In the general area, the area around is also zoned CDD. You have above to the north, you have the Church of the Highlands. To the east is the airport, and then to the west you have the high school. The area itself is classified in the comp plan as, has two different designations. There's a split between the gateway commercial and office park designations. Gateway commercial is centered along the eastern section of this area. It's characterized by a pretty broad mix of uses similar to what you would find in the CDD. In fact, it's already, it's listed as such in the zoning ordinance that that would be similar. To the west, you would have the office park designation, generally around this line right here. So it kind of divides it about a 2/3, 1/3. That office park designation includes mostly kind of uses in a campus setting and an average breakdown of uses generally between commercial and office, 85% for office and then 15% commercial. This is a copy of the master plan here. It's broken down into two different phases. You have phase one up here to the west, and then you have phase one down to the east. Phase one consists primarily listed as commercial lots that are surrounding the extent of Sanford Village Court, and then you have unlisted up there as a detention pond further up. Phase two, further towards East Glen, is a mix of commercial closer towards the corridors, and then you have a multi-unit development that's located at the backside of a future right-of-way that's located there. That multi-unit development is proposed at 284 units, which, as taken as a stage here in the phase two, provides a density of 14 dwelling units an acre, which conforms with the PDD, which conforms with the zoning ordinance for PDD. As you can see, it consists primarily of development surrounding these two different cul-de-sacs, and then an additional access road along here towards the east. Staff recommends that the commercial and the residential developments share some internal street network that connects Sanford Village Court to the two proposed public streets to allow the residents of any multifamily development to have better ingress-egress access. And this would also support a closed loop, or it would support a looped water system that Water Resource Management has been working towards. Staff is recommending approval. There's a difference between this and the report that you have in front of you after some discussions with the developer and also a little bit more further analysis on the ordinance based on the staging and phasing language. Staff now feels that the proposed density of the multi-unit development is conforming, and we don't have an issue with that. The only other condition that we would request is that the commercial lots here on in phase one be shown as be changed to show office, that it would conform with the future land use. It would still allow a certain percentage of which to be commercial, so it wouldn't exclude that use. Communication received so far has been primarily for information. I have received, had some reached out from the university since they are an adjoining landowner there with the airport. Their primary concerns was just simply to make sure that the developer was being forthwith about the fact that it's in the airport overlay district. The property does exist within the airport noise impact zone, as does anything else that's about 2,600 feet away from the runway. That impact zone essentially recommends to applicants that they install noise level reduction measures and materials, which is common in the current construction codes. So, pending any of your questions.
have a question. Why a PDD now?
I'm sorry?
Why a PDD now? It's been kind of building over time.
Well, I can't answer that question with 100% accuracy, only kind of what I know historically about the property. This property sets itself up very well for a master development plan. It's something that, quite frankly, we've been encouraging the developer to look at for some time, and I think as the vision for the property has evolved, I think they reached a point where it became clear that this was probably the best thing to do, to go ahead and get it master planned and give some certainty to future development, and also be more sensitive to how instead of developing the parcels incrementally, it kind of forces you into getting a bigger picture vision for how everything's going to kind of work together and interrelate, and so I think they saw the value and the benefit of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Howell? Okay, thank you. Is there a representative here for this item that would like to?
A representative is here.
Like to? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, this item requires a public hearing, so at this time I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak about it. All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask for questions, comments, or motion from the commission.
I move to approve PL 2018-00764 Sanford Village rezoning PDD overlay with staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Okay, so item number 13 is related. This is PL 2018-782, which is the conditional use component of this. Mr. Howell.
Yes, sir. Okay, so accompanying the PDD application is this conditional use. The conditional uses that they've requested kind of represent a pretty wide swipe of potential uses that might want to be tenants of the location. It includes a laundry list of these right here. We worked with the representative to kind of take a look at some of this. This actually represents a whittled down version versus what was originally proposed. So they are working with us. The conditional use also comes with a waiver request to the special development standards for hotels, motel count, and condotels. Again, they're distributed uses among the master development plan. Here's an exhibit specifically for the waiver request. Okay, so the proposed hotel site located here at the extent of this future road and in between that and this access road does not currently meet as proposed, does not meet the zoning ordinance, which requires hotels to front arterial roads. Given the area, given the development, given the commercial nature that's already been developed, staff does feel that this location is compatible in the area that it is. And so we are recommending approval of the waiver itself. Let's see. Like I said, because staff has already been working with the developer to review those conditional use, and we recommend approval for that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Howell? Okay, thank you. This also requires a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody that would like to come forward to talk about these conditional use recommendations to come forward now. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, ask for questions, comments, or a motion from the commission.
I move we approve PL case 00782, the Sanford Village conditional use with staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Agenda item number 14, PL 2018-768 Woodward Oaks, Phase 3. This is a preliminary plat approval. Ms. Robeson.
That's correct. This is a request for a 58-lot performance single-family subdivision. It's the third phase of Woodward Oaks subdivision off of North Donahue. It is just north of Phase 1, which is in this location, And Phase 2 is here. The master development plan, they do provide connectivity, as is contemplated in the master development plan. What's proposed is actually better than the master development plan in that you're connecting these two cul-de-sacs here. So it does provide a little more connectivity. They are required per phase to meet 15% open space. They have provided one lot of open space, which is just over an acre and a quarter, and it's about 6%, so they're a little less than what's required, but they do have open space that surrounds it. They'll just have to demarcate that and make it a lot itself. We do recommend approval of the project with staff comments. Let's see.
So is that just a administrative sort of change to the plat, or is that something that we have to see again and approve another lot for that open space?
Well, when they bring in the final plat, if they have another lot on there,
Okay,
I don't think that would.
all right.
Yeah, we've got some discretion on when you need to come back for a revision or not.
So as long as they make that correction, that'd be fine.
I suspect that change would not rise to that level.
The largest residential lot is just over a third of an acre, and the smallest lot is just under a quarter acre in size. And I did not receive any correspondence on this case and would be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have any requirement that, see, the access to the open space is supposed to be accessible for everybody, and they do have an access easement identified. There's no requirement that they identify that access there, is there?
Not if it's a lot itself.
It's not, it's part of the lot.
That little pipe stem thing you're
Like
talking
a
about?
flag.
Flag lot?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's how everybody can access that.
Correct.
But chances are, it's not going to be designated. Chances are, Lot 31 will mow it and keep it and think it's part of their, everybody will think it's part of their lot. I just think that I would encourage them to somehow identify access to the open space.
Okay.
That's just more of a suggestion. It's not a requirement. But I think that I like that the fact that the bulk of the open space is in one nice critical mass. But for it to be used, people need to know it's free to go through that egress.
Yes.
I think that's a good.
And that's also one of our comments is to designate the type of open space that this will be.
Yeah, because we'll get complaints that there are activities in their backyard they don't like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And the applicant's representative is here this evening.
Would you like to speak? Who's that? Does the representative have anything to say? Okay. Okay, this requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody that would like to come forward and speak on this to come forward now. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing, ask for questions, comments, motion from the commission.
I move that PL 2018-768 Woodward Oaks Phase 3 preliminary plat be approved, subject to meeting all concerns and requirements in staff report.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Agenda item number 15 is PL 2018-771, 336 East Thatch, a private dormitory proposal. Mr. Kipp.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is a conditional use request to allow a performance residential use private dormitory to be located at 336 East Thatch Avenue in the Urban Neighborhood South zoning district. A little bit of history on the project. It was originally submitted as a building permit for an interior remodel It was brought to our attention that they were expanding the bedrooms on the main part of the house, which kind of triggered conditional use approval for their part, given that it's a not legally non-conforming use currently. It never received conditional use approval for what it is definitionally. The property is owned by ABG Opelika Road LLC, and their authorized representative is Sarah Heatherly, who I believe is doing the remodel work on it. Staff is recommending approval, but I did want to show you the site plan. The main structure is the larger structure up in the front. When you drive by it, it looks a lot like a single-family home, but it is actually a duplex with the current floor plan. And there's another accessory dwelling unit in the back, which is all of it's being used as rental property at this time. Here is the floor plan for the main structure that's undergoing the remodel. It has 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, two entryways. And this is the proposed remodel. Consists of 6 bedrooms. They're adding a second story with 2 bedrooms, essentially. And this is what has triggered the requirement to have a conditional use approval for the property. Here's a picture of the house, or of the duplex up front. And you can see in the back the accessory structure as well, accessory dwelling unit back. Here's an aerial showing the property and kind of surrounding uses. To the west are other similar structures, whether either duplexes or single-family homes that also have an accessory dwelling unit in the back, making them essentially private dormitories definitionally. And to the east, up at the north part there for us, there's a duplex, and then behind them some single-family homes that are being rented. I did receive one citizen communication from Mr. Lowry, who lives at this property. More so informational. Gave him the necessary information, but didn't hear any opposition or support. I do want to highlight one correction in the staff comments. Show location of required off-street parking spaces at standard dimensions, 9 are required. Happy to answer any questions, and authorized representative is here.
I'm here for any questions or any
Okay.
clarification.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, this one requires a public hearing as well, so I'm going to open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody that would like to speak on this private dormitory recommendation to come forward at this time.
My name is Sandra Fagan. I live at 306 East Thatch Avenue. You have to forgive my ignorance. I haven't been to a planning commission meeting in years because I kind of gave up on Auburn City planning. And I've listened here tonight to all these people talk about pigeonholing developers and talking about doing this and talking about doing that. And I've heard very little about talking about people like me who own my house, who the gentleman referred to as border houses was a border house of my great-grandmother's. Now you're talking about putting a dorm 3 lots down from me, or 4 lots down from me. And I think there's been enough damage done to that section of town. All the old houses, everything's gone. Everything's gone. I appreciate wanting to commit to the university and wanting to accommodate them, but I think we've gone overboard and we've lost beautiful, beautiful properties doing that. And my house was built in 1920, which is nothing. And now it happens to be one of the oldest houses in Auburn. I never would have thought that. Never would have thought that. And I just think it's a tragedy. And no, I'm not going to sit up here and argue semantics and argue architecture and argue floor plans and things like that. I'm just going to appeal to you and just beg you not to let this be done. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Drew Goodner, 432 Pinedale Drive. I'm the property owner. And I think some clarifications needed that it's called a private dormitory, not to you all, but to some other people, but this is a house that's going up. It's going to look just like the other houses that are on the street. I own some other properties in the area, and this is not going to stick out at all. It's not a 3-story apartment complex. It's a house. Can we show that again, what it's going to look like first? Sure. That's your private dormitory right there. I think it looks nice. I think it's very fitting for the area. I know this area used to be zoned university services. You could do 75 feet. I've owned property in this area for a while. It's been slowly downgraded over the years. I'm fine with that. I know it's a family neighborhood. I used to live across the street from this house. I still own that. I live down the street from this house now, and I like the area. I like the houses. I think they're a nice touch compared to some of the apartments that are coming in. I think this is a nice house. There's plenty of parking there. Shouldn't be any issues, but I think there is a little bit of confusion over the term private dormitory. So, questions or anything about it? Good, thank you.
I'm sorry, we've already had your chance up here. Okay, anybody else like to speak?
Stefan Pettit, 427 Pinedale Drive. Right now, I mean, it looks fine. If any of y'all want to drive by that house, it looks a little like it's falling apart. Really, it needs to be just a touch-up, not this 2-story house to be built there, not 9 parking lots. I think the house right now just needs to be fixed up. Me living on Pinedale Drive for 15 years, and this getting really close to our neighborhood. A couple houses down, there are college students that are there, and when I try to sleep and I have a hard time sleeping, I can't go to sleep. It's because of the music. They always keep making it loud and all that, and sometimes you can hear the cops near there and all that, but from this, it's getting too close. And I just want to tell you all that you wouldn't want to have a house or be living to college students near you. The front looks fine, but it just needs a touch-up. If you guys do decide to do something like this, make it a 1-story. 2 stories is starting to be too much. I just wanted y'all to consider that.
Thank you. Sure. If you're the applicant, well, hang on, let me close the public hearing first. The applicant will have another chance here in a minute. Anybody else like to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Drew.
See, it's a.
Drew, I'm sorry, real quick. Forrest, can we go back? Do we have an aerial view? Can you put that up, please? Sorry, Drew, go ahead.
You're fine. You'll see I think it's a very modest 2-story. It's kind of a back structure that makes it that. If you were looking at the house to the right, it's 2-story. If you look to the house to the right of that, it's 2-story. It's similar elevation. I think it's 25 feet, 3 inches, something like that. If you're looking at the property to the left, that property owner I've spoken with, he's okay with it. He owns both parcels to the left. The house on Payne Street, the first true address on Payne Street, SNH Properties, that's a rental property. I haven't had any correspondence with them. Bob Lowry, who you mentioned, had correspondence with y'all. He did email and said, I see nothing objectionable about it. His comments at first were, it's a private dormitory. He thought it was a hotel or a student complex coming in there. He was just unsure of what it was, but after I showed him the elevation, everything, he said, oh, looks great. So just wanted to clarify those items. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
You know, as your call from packet meeting, I had some concerns about some of the issues that have been raised. On the other hand, it could be an academic dwelling unit. It could be 35 feet high. It could be much larger than what they've done. And I think given our ordinance, this is probably the best we can do. I mean, I'd rather see it as a single individual house, single family house, but that's not our prerogative. That's the owner's prerogative. And
absolutely.
So it's not that I'm holding my nose and voting for this, but it's not what I'd like to see, but I think on the ordinance, it's probably the best use.
Well, can I make a sort of a historical comment? The lady in the blue blouse said that she had given up on Auburn Planning. Payne Street was one of the battlegrounds in the mid-'80s as we were developing this ordinance as to where you draw the line for university services area and single-family neighborhoods, NCs. The people there on Payne Street came here and said just because they're adjacent to campus does not mean they expect the same kind of consideration for an established neighborhood. They even brought more than a dozen elementary school kids here with posters, all of which said, "Save our neighborhood." What I'm saying is, I didn't believe them at the time, although I think we made the right decision in terms of drawing that line at least there, because Payne Street has been stable.
Oh, it's real stable.
And what changes have occurred on Payne Street has been more toward the family house, according to the
Single
NC,
family houses, yeah.
than the other way. So I don't know. Of course, this is an area that is really difficult. Thatch Avenue depends on how far down you go to Thatch as to when it transitions into something altogether different than it was up there at Gay Street. So I can understand what she's saying and the people who live in Pinedale and in and around that area. So as we deal with this, this is a modest change, basically. But we need to be aware of the fragility of that end of Payne Street. Now, granted, the first three lots are not as stable looking as the lots from there down. But, I too, Dan, are concerned, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to hold my nose or not yet, but hear what more people think.
Well, as I say, the owner could literally tear it down and put an academic dwelling unit there that's 35 feet high, and it would have, I guess, 4 less students in it potentially, because I think you're planning 9, is that what you said? 8 as opposed to 5. That's the difference, I guess. But I think the plan works. I mean, I think it's an appropriate scale. I mean, many of the houses on Payne Street are 2-story. And you could certainly build 2-story houses on Payne Street. And Payne Street also backs up to an apartment complex, as well. So it's just kind of what it is, I'm afraid.
All right. Do I have any further discussion or a motion?
I will make a motion to approve PL 28771. You get it with staff. Are there staff comments? With staff comments.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries. Okay, where are we at here? We are on agenda item number 16, PL 2018-770, Moores Mill Golf Club Phase 4B. It's a redivision of a lot 118A, in a waiver request.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the case before you is a waiver request seeking the ability to it's a waiver request to Greenway Design Standards of the City of Auburn subdivision regulation. The property is located at 1655 Fairway Drive in the southeast area of town, near the Ogletree Village, Moores Mill Road area. As it currently stands, the property exists as a single lot at the southern extent of the Moores Mill Golf Club in the DDH base zone, mostly inside the PDD. What's proposed, the applicant is wishing to subdivided into 2 different lots. And because of the subdivision regulations, they're required to provide public right-of-way or easements to any portions of planned greenways that run through the proposed subdivision. Here's a copy of that subdivision of showing the proposed 2 different lots. All told, the lot is approximately 3.5 acres and divided essentially by 2, mostly, by and large, for the most part, equally. Here and highlighted in green is the area of Moores Mill Creek that runs along the western boundary of the property. Because of the floodplain, the approximately 1.5 acres would exist within a public easement for a proposed greenway as designated in the 2011 Greenway Plan. This provides for approximately 3/4 of an acre in both remaining lots for buildable areas. Here's a overhead of the area. You see the Moores Mill Golf Club above it. There's a lot directly to the north of it, separating it from the golf course, which is for power lines easement. And then further south, you have Lake Wilmore Park, which the proposed greenway would tie into, further south, off screen to the southwest. Pending any of your questions, though.
Explain again why you recommended denial.
So the staff is recommending denial because the subdivision states that they need to provide, that they are to provide public access for designated greenway, of which this is a designated greenway in the 2011 Greenway Plan. So we are recommending denial because of that.
Why is it, has the subdivider intimated why they don't want to do that? What's required?
Well, the applicant is here, or the applicant's authorized representative is here tonight. I'll let him speak to that.
Okay, well, let's hear that. Where we?
Good evening, Mike Marr. I work for Precision Surveying. Mr. Thrower is away on business, so he wasn't able to be here. Mr. Thrower really has 2 main issues that he's concerned about for the Greenway. One, if you notice, these particular lots have a long flag access that goes to the back, which means the only visible curb presence you have with the lot is right there where their mailbox is going to be. Because of that, with a pedestrian access to the rear of the lot, he doesn't feel as though he's very secure in his home. He feels as though with the limited access or limited visibility of the home in the front and the ability for people to come into the back, it makes him a prime target for people to feel as though they could just basically roll a baby stroller to the back of his house, load up, and head back out again, and no one would really even know. He also has another concern. His bank had a question about it. If this request for denial or this request is denied, if he's indemnified for injuries if they occur. If you had a picture of the creek, there are rather steep embankments that go down to the bottom of Moores Mill Creek. So he's concerned if there is a public pedestrian access in the back there and someone falls off, whether or not he's liable for personal injuries of people that are using the pedestrian access. In addition, there's 2 other items that we'd like to kind of raise up to you. One is, Forrest, is there a picture of the Greenway Plan at all that you have in this packet?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I believe that having looked at the Greenway, I didn't bring it with me here. I was expecting that to be part of the presentation. That the Greenway begins, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, the Greenway begins at Windway and then travels northward and stops at the golf course. Is that correct?
It does stop south. It does stop here at the. This is the northern extent of that greenway.
So what you've got is basically a dead-end access on the greenway. One of my concerns with Mr. Thrower was this: if we deny this here, then that cuts you off from the rest of the access all the way up to Moores Mill Road. But apparently, the greenway isn't planned to go all the way through Moores Mill Golf Club and up to Moores Mill Road. So I guess the only caveat I have for you that may mitigate granting this waiver is the fact that saying no to the waiver or saying no to the greenway access really doesn't put you in any worse position you are right now. The greenway wasn't going to go any further. We're merely clipping off about 300 foot of what was planned. Any other questions I'd be willing to answer. Like I said, I wish Mr. Thrower were here.
How else is this, this is kind of for whoever knows the right answer, how else is this accessed? I mean, is that the singular access for this piece of the greenway, or is there other access points?
So the access easements are built through the subdivision process, and that's the purpose for the regulation. As it stands right now, there's all the property to the south of it. The most recent subdivision has been about the early 1980s, and so there has been no further subdivision requests to be able to start building the easement. So this is essentially the first in that stretch of land.
I think, though, to answer your question, the greenway path just starts at Windway, goes to the west, and then goes to the north along our property.
Is there a better view?
Did you bring up the aerial?
Some kind?
Did you bring up the aerial?
And to clarify, the access is along the creek, not
Right.
along the stem.
So from what I remember from looking up the greenway access, the greenway began right here and followed the creek line on both sides right up to here and then stopped. This, by the way, is not a power line. That's the Southern Natural Gas right away at that point right there.
So if we put a access point in there, what does it look like? Is that on that plat? What does the access through that property look like, or what's it supposed to look like?
There is no access from the public right-of-way through this property proposed. What I suspect would be an access proposal either through working with the golf course or through the utility that borders it to the north. That hasn't been determined at this time.
Now I'm confused. So
I think what's being explained is that, according to Mike, because we don't have a copy of the plan with us, but that if you look at the greenway plan, there should be a greenway going right up to here, and it basically stops at this easement.
Right.
Also, because it's our subdivision, in other words, we can't the only way we have a mechanism to realize the greenway plan is through subdivision activity. Right? So there has been none in this area that would enable the city to actually acquire easements through here. Okay. So if you require the easement, it would be just here, and it would really just be an island unto itself, right along the two lots that this gentleman controls. If you require it and he does it, then it doesn't serve a whole lot of utility or purpose until such time as the remainder of this could be provided to provide access. So I think what Mike is saying is, I think what he's saying is that if this is actually the terminus, if you do require the easement, it's just along this property. It wouldn't go anywhere for that. They wouldn't go anywhere after that anyway.
So we're not talking. I was confused in that we're not talking about an access across their property. We're just saying there's an easement at the back that's going to be part of this greenway.
Right. That citizens could traverse if this connection is ever made.
But the only change would be it would terminate on is at the south end of his property as opposed to the north.
Right. If you support the waiver and you grant the waiver to not have to provide it, then there's no greenway at all. But at the point in time that we can get a greenway, it would just stop here instead of stopping here.
All right. One final further question: is the creek bank on his property similar to the one that goes down toward Windway?
It's very similar. It's a little steeper on Mr. Thrower's property than it is down near Windway. The banks are more incised.
I have another question for us. So just because I don't know, if they're required to have a public easement there, is this an actual path that people can walk through, or is it just on the plat a legal easement that may become a road at one point if developed further?
As a greenway, there's no roads and.
So we're in the process, don't mean to interrupt you, Forrest.
No, I wasn't
Updating
saying
a
that.
greenway and bike lane master plan. The consultant will prioritize greenways. They will develop cross-sections for us so that we can determine how best to budget for those caption improvements. At some point, it could be an actual path. It could be gravel, it could be asphalt, it could be concrete. We're not quite there yet.
Right now, it's just a legal easement. It's just something on a.
Just a legal easement set aside so that when we had those plans defined a little more, we would know what we would build right there.
Okay, so I have a question from that. So if that plan comes to fruition, it would still not ever go past the north side
North end of his property.
Thrower's property?
They've recommended changes to the this is the existing greenway plan that was adopted in 2011. So there have been no updates to it. So it
But
could be that the consultant-
at the north where that would connect, isn't that an easement, a power line easement of some kind? That you could hang a left and go hiking all the way up that way, sort of thing?
Well, where it connects is to the golf course, which is a private property.
Yeah, which you can't walk on.
And apparently, the city did not require and did not have this requirement to make the Clevelands grant an easement.
This goes to Lake Wilmore property, but we can also require easements from the golf course or from the property to the south if there's a project plan outside of a subdivision activity.
Say that again?
If we had a greenway project, we could acquire easements outside of a subdivision if we needed to, just like we do for other city projects.
Purchase is what you're saying.
Pardon?
Purchase.
Or donated, yes.
Your client was concerned about safety, somebody coming in the back down that creek, and he's way off the road. That is a very odd-shaped lot to begin with. And the fact that he's afraid to live back there, will this make him more comfortable if we don't require it? Is that what you're saying?
That's what he's told me. I mean, I'm not going to crawl inside someone's head, but he did like, I mean, it is kind of strange. He likes the isolation, but then he doesn't like the access in the back added to that isolation. I think that's the problem, is he likes having that exclusive feel. Dr. MacArthur owned it before he did. He purchased it from Dr. MacArthur because he likes the open woods in the back. He liked having the creek back there and having the limited access, but then realizing that there might be a path eventually built back there, concrete, chip, whatever, gave him a lot of unease. That's when he asked me to ask for the waiver.
Now, Forest is the property behind, to the west of, assuming this north-south, to the west of this, where this easement is proposed, to the west of that, is that subdivided? What is on that property? I see what looks like a swimming pool.
That's what I see too.
It used to be the BB's, Mr. McCord.
That backs up to Windway.
That backs up to Windway. Okay.
I guess I don't see the compelling interest to, grant a waiver and cut off the city's easement that could, for the future. I don't even get what.
How about if I suggest we open a public hearing here real quick, and then we'll see if we have any other inputs. and then
This doesn't require a public hearing.
Okay.
To me, I don't see what you gain by moving it to the north of that property personally. I mean, I just don't, I think we could work with the homeowner here to satisfy his
I agree.
concerns. I don't like to oppose staff, but I'm just not sure this.
Well, they're basing it on our own plan. Their recommendation is it doesn't, without our waiver, it does not meet the requirements of subdivision regulations, and therefore they recommend denial. I agree. I don't see how we gain a whole lot here. And we wouldn't be seeing this if this had not required a waiver, right? Because this could be administratively
Yes,
done.
sir. That's right.
So, I don't see a need for it right now.
You don't see a need for the denial.
Yeah, I don't see any need to grant the waiver. I mean, in other words, give them the way. I don't see any need for the easement. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So I'll move we grant the waiver.
Second.
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to grant the waiver, which means overturning the denial, right?
No, it's not overturning,
They're
you're
recommending.
just making a decision that's not consistent with staff's recommendation, which is fine. That's why we're here.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
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 Okay, so that's 2 against
3.
I said no.
3. So that's 3 total. So the motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to other business. The other business item here is again, this is the first meeting of the calendar year, and even though we had an election for officers earlier due to the city council election, we'll have another opportunity to do that again. So the first order of business is to have a meeting of the commission to elect a new chairman, so I'll take nominations.
I wonder if I could ask for a point of order and move that we accept the existing officers that were elected in June by acclamation. We do that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
We have a
I
motion.
may not want to do it, but.
Second. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Okay, as for
I knew Mac had been awfully quiet tonight, but he's making up for it here.
the chairman's communication, I have a couple things that I just would like to at least mention. So just recently, the city council last meeting passed they adopted the recommendations of the boards and commissions task force. And again, like I had mentioned last meeting, that does specifically affect the planning commission. And I've had a couple of contacts with the mayor and talked about, having some sort of input into that ahead of time, which I would have preferred. But at this point, it looks like what he's offered is that part of it is one of the impacts is that in order to be recommended to be a planning commissioner, there's an interview process now for the planning commission, and there's also, for what it's worth, an interview for the school board. Otherwise, boards and commissions don't have interviews. So they have offered that if we want to, we can make inputs into the types of questions that might be asked on that.
If I may, since this is post hoc.
Yeah.
Is that the fact that the law is very clear, in my understanding, that the mayor makes the appointments.
Right.
And the council confirms. Normally, the interviews would occur after the mayor chooses whom he wants to nominate. It would seem to me that's the normal procedure in those kinds of processes. And then the interviews begin.
Yeah, and that's not, I don't believe that's
that's not the way it's going to be done.
That was adopted.
And,
That's right.
See, which means then the mayor will get someone, will approve. First of all, planning commission is a citywide, none of us represent a district.
Right.
A ward, a zone, or a neighborhood. We represent the entire city. That's why we're appointed by the one elected official that's elected citywide. We have 6-year terms so that we try to stay out of the political cycle. So I have some concerns about the process, but it's done and
it's what it is.
We live it.
So that's one thing to kind of consider. And so what I do recommend is that you have a look at that and see what was adopted. Generally speaking, there's interviews. Again, we could make some inputs to what kind of questions. And then there's some criteria on what, to have like a matrix that basically says, here's what, there's some criteria. Now, how that actually plays out is, I'm not really sure. That things like, I can't remember exactly, but maybe citizen of Auburn, there's some kind of experience, and there's a matrix of about 6 or 7 different things that they want to look at and kind of see what everybody what kind of experience they have.
So just in terms of process, so normally, if there's a position open, 10, 12 people will apply for it, fill out the forms.
Right.
The mayor makes a recommendation to the council based on that. So will they interview each of those?
No, because what they do is they'll have a committee that, they're going to have a committee that's going to include the mayor or the mayor pro tem, and that's either 3 or 5, and I can't remember. There's a reason why they'd have 3 or 5 people, depending on which one it is.
Sorry, Phil, if I could, the mayor pro tem is going to scale down the applications to a certain number to be determined, and then the panel of 3 or however many will interview that scaled down number if the situation calls for it.
There you go.
And then they will recommend to the mayor, is that? So the mayor's really not making the decision.
If you go in there and read what was adopted, it gets pretty specific on that, on where the mayor plays a role and where the mayor does not play a role. And that's probably worthwhile for everybody to have a look at.
I guess the thing that Warren brings up, and I agree, is it makes this a political body, which is what.
That's where I have the issue.
See, the questions, are they going to sit down and say, how do you feel, what do you think about the height the buildings ought to be downtown?
They could.
Well, see, that you're supposed to be open to data and input.
When you get it from the hearing, the public hearing, that's all part of it.
That's why we have public hearings. That's why we have staff look at that.
I think the questions also have a tremendous potential to limit if, depending on the answers and how the votes go, if it's going to be up to a vote of the council, to limit our diversity.
Yes, I'm concerned about that.
And, the range of disciplines that we come from and perspectives that we all have. So, again, just to echo Phil, take a look at those. And if they're giving us the opportunity to at least weigh in on the questions, I think we should strongly consider taking advantage of that.
I agree. Second thing I wanted just
hang on before you leave that. Would it be reasonable for us to do that collectively in a work session so that I think
I would like to have more of this discussion in a work session, because I think there's more to it than just the questions, especially the diversity piece of it, because I'm concerned about that part. This is supposed to represent the community. It's not supposed to represent experienced planners.
So maybe, Forrest, you could schedule that. I don't know how soon we have to have that, but I guess there's no real hurry because there's not going to be
Forrest can schedule it, but I think he should not be participating in it as a staff.
Yeah, but it'd be good for him to stay.
I'm totally fine with that.
Or we could meet at the Hound over beer if you want.
Okay, the second thing I just wanted to kind of throw out there
public meeting
is the idea of, we have the election for the positions on the commission. This is more of a just think about it for now, and then maybe we can talk about it over time, because we have another year before we elect again. But should there be a progression through
set of chairs type thing?
Yeah, because one of the things that I think is, there's some utility, at least for the vice to the chairman. You have some experience doing a couple of meetings, and so there maybe the answer is, you go in as vice with the knowledge that you will be chair next year. Some kind of a progression. I don't know how the secretary would play into that. Those are the 3 positions. Just think about that, and that's another little discussion we can have at maybe the work session or something.
There's nothing for us that governs how we do that process.
No, ma'am, you just have an annual meeting, and that's about all the bylaws say, is that's the time when you select your officers.
And that's what I'm suggesting is, do we want to amend the bylaws? So,
you can always amend the bylaws.
We kind of done that, or at least did it this year.
Yeah.
But,
and it has been done and passed both ways. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of make that point. Mr. Cotton, you have anything else to wrap us up?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, we stand adjourned.
Here, Amber, recycle those. Till next, we don't want to waste. No waste.